Chapter 1. Introduction. In this chapter you will learn what nitrox is, a bit of nitrox history, benefits of diving with enriched air nitrox, some common misconceptions about nitrox, and some points about nitrox terminology. Let's get started. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to describe what nitrox is, list other names for nitrox, state the early history of diving with gases other than air, state when NAUI sanctioned nitrox diving, and describe what nitrox is not. What is nitrox? As the term is used in recreational diving, nitrox is air in which the fraction of nitrogen has been reduced. Commonly, this is accomplished by adding oxygen to air, but it can just as easily be done by removing some of the nitrogen. As the nitrogen percentage goes down, the oxygen percentage goes up. The resulting gas mixture has been given several names: oxygen-enriched air nitrox, and nitrox. You will also see it called EANX, where the X is usually replaced by the percentage of oxygen. EAN32 would be a nitrogen-oxygen mixture that is 32% oxygen. Nitrox is the most widely used term. Actually, nitrox can refer to any mixture of nitrogen and oxygen, so plain ordinary air would be nitrox, and in the past, nitrox has even been used to refer to nitrogen-oxygen mixtures with less oxygen than air that were used in undersea habitat diving. Reducing the amount of nitrogen in what you breathe underwater addresses some of the problems caused by nitrogen. When using nitrox, it is possible to dive longer to a given depth or to reduce the required surface interval between dives. Nitrox may have other advantages too. Whether it is true or not, many nitrox divers report that they feel less fatigued after their dives. However, there are trade-offs. As we reduce the nitrogen fraction, the oxygen fraction increases. As you will learn in this course, the higher oxygen content presents its own limitations. Oxygen breathed under high pressures can become poisonous. So, for example, when diving with nitrox, we must limit our maximum depth in order to reduce the possibility of oxygen toxicity. Today, nitrox is almost universally accepted as a breathing gas for recreational diving. The benefits and advantages far outweigh the problems and possible disadvantages. As a diver, you need a certain amount of knowledge, awareness, caution, and sensibility to use nitrox safely. But this is just as true of diving in general. The development of nitrox use began in 1878 with Paul Burt showing that nitrogen is the cause of DCS. In 1908, the first diving decompression tables were published. Other developments leading up to nitrox use include the attribution of narcosis to nitrogen, the U.S. Navy diving manual's inclusion of oxygen-enriched air, and NOAA's diving manual, publishing NOAA Nitrox 1 as a standard mix. Controversy surrounding the use of nitrox began in 1991. Nitrox agencies were almost barred from a major dive show, the DEMA show. In 1992, NAUI endorsed EANX and officially accepted certifications from the two specialized nitrox training agencies. In 1995, PADI, British Sub-Aqua Club, and other recreational training agencies announced that they would soon offer enriched air nitrox instruction programs. Also in 1995, Skin Diver magazine declared use of nitrox acceptable. In 1996, NAUI codified standards for enriched air nitrox training and certification in its revised NAUI Standards and Policies Manual. Shortly thereafter, NAUI published the first Nitrox training textbook from a mainstream recreational dive training agency. Today, enriched air nitrox has become a viable and valued part of recreational diving, and nitrox fills are available to qualified divers at diving destinations around the world. In your EANX training course, you will learn the facts about enriched air nitrox and how to use it safely. Nitrox has some benefits for its use in diving. You will gain a greater appreciation of both the benefits and the necessary precautions as you learn more about diving with oxygen-enriched air. First, and most notably, Nitrox allows divers to extend their bottom time and enjoy longer dives without having a required decompression obligation. Notice, from this table, the difference in bottom time at 100 feet between air and EAN 36. Nitrox also has advantages in repetitive dives. Looking at a typical recreational dive profile, let's compare a series of two dives. One diver is breathing air, and the other diver is breathing EAN 36. The first dive is to 24 meters or 80 feet for 30 minutes. After a 1-hour surface interval, the second dive will be to 17 meters or 55 feet. A comparison of dive plans shows the dive time advantage using Nitrox. The diver breathing EAN 36 has significantly greater no decompression time than the air diver. Diver 1, using air and the NAUI dive tables, emerges from the first dive with a letter group of G. 1 hour later, entering the water as an F diver, the diver has an adjusted maximum dive time of 19 minutes for the 17-meter or 55 feet dive. If the diver is using the NAUI RGBM tables, he has a maximum dive time of 55 minutes for the second dive. Diver 2, using EAN 36 and NAUI EAN 36 dive tables, finishes the first dive with a letter group of F. 1 hour later, she begins the second dive as an E diver. She has an adjusted maximum dive time of 62 minutes for her 17 meters or 55 feet dive. If using the NAUI RGBM EAN 36 tables, she would have a maximum dive time of 115 minutes. On the second dive, the diver using enriched air nitrox has a 43-minute advantage over the diver using air if using the NAUI dive tables, or a 60-minute advantage if using the NAUI RGBM tables. Another benefit of Nitrox is the possibility of a shorter required surface interval. In the example above, the Nitrox diver has 62 minutes available dive time after a 1-hour surface interval if using the NAUI dive tables. If the air diver using the same tables wanted to have a dive time of 30 minutes, he would have to attain a letter group of D before beginning the second dive. To move from G to D requires a surface interval time of at least 2 hours. The NAUI RGBM tables are based on a 1-hour surface interval, so those numbers do not change. Technical divers will breathe a highly oxygen-rich nitrox mixture during their shallower decompression stops or long exposures in the shallow zones in order to more efficiently eliminate nitrogen from their bodies. Another very common use of nitrox in diving is simply as a safety margin. Divers who choose to dive conservatively will often breathe nitrox but continue to use air dive tables or an air computer. Over a series of dives, they will absorb significantly less nitrogen than their tables or computers indicate, effectively lowering their risk of decompression sickness. Finally, there may be truth in the claim of divers that they are less physically tired after a series of dives on enriched air nitrox. With less nitrogen in their bodies than they would have had diving on air, the divers may indeed feel less fatigue at the end of their diving day or diving trip. As was said earlier, many misunderstandings developed about nitrox as it began to be known, but not well understood, in the recreational diving industry. Before you move on to the next topic in this course, you should be aware of some of the persistent myths about nitrox and be able to sift the fact from the fiction. Myth 1. Nitrox is for technical diving. Although technical divers use oxygen-enriched air when appropriate, such as during in-water decompression stops, the use of nitrox does not make a dive technical. Technical dives are planned decompression dives, deep dives where both nitrogen and oxygen in the breathing gas may be diluted with helium, trimix, dives in which one changes between gas mixes during the dive, dives that use an oxygen percentage greater than 40%, or dives into overhead environments such as caves or wrecks. Myth 2. Nitrox is for deep diving. Quite the opposite. Because of the increased concentration of oxygen in nitrox, there are stringent depth limits imposed to prevent oxygen toxicity. Nitrox is a mid-range breathing gas and provides the greatest advantages for dives in the 15 to 33 meters or 50 to 110 feet depth range. Beyond that depth, the decompression advantage gain is minimal, and the risk of oxygen toxicity problems increases rapidly. Later in this course, you will learn how to determine maximum operating depth, MOD, for various nitrox mixes. Myth 3. If you dive with nitrox, you won't get bent. Enriched air nitrox only reduces the fraction of nitrogen in the gas you breathe. It does not eliminate it. Moreover, no breathing gas mixture, dive table, or dive computer can absolutely eliminate the possibility of decompression sickness. Nitrox has advantages over air because the partial pressure of the nitrogen is less for any given depth. Nitrogen ingassing is slower, but you must still monitor depth and time, as well as the specifics of your breathing mixture, to avoid excessive nitrogen accumulation in your body. The knowledge and procedures in this text will help you control the risks of decompression sickness while maximizing the safety and enjoyment of your dives. Myth 4. Nitrox is safer than air. Nothing that we do is entirely without risk. All diving involves some risk, and as noted above, there are risks associated with nitrox. In this course, you will learn procedures and techniques to responsibly manage and minimize the risks of using oxygen-enriched air. Nitrox has advantages over air in many diving applications, such as increased available dive time and decompression advantages. But with these advantages comes your added responsibility to be mindful of oxygen levels and depth and time limits. Analyze your own gas mixture and properly maintain your equipment, therefore diving prudently. Myth 5. If you dive with nitrox, you won't get narcosis. It is easy to assume that the reduced nitrogen in nitrox should reduce narcosis just as it provides advantages in other areas. The fact is that narcosis involves many factors, some of which are psychological. Evidence on nitrox and narcosis is sparse, but it is best to regard the narcotic potency of nitrox as the same as that of air. While it has been theorized that unmetabolized oxygen may be as narcotic as nitrogen, recreational nitrox divers do not subject themselves to oxygen pressures where this could be a factor. In order to reduce narcosis on deep dives, technical divers use trimix to lower both the nitrogen and the oxygen content of their breathing gas. Myth 6. It is hard to dive with nitrox. This course will help you learn the proper planning and procedures for conducting dives with enriched air nitrox. Most of the procedures are simple, and while there are calculations involved, the formulas are usually backed up with tables where you can look up the necessary derived information. Using nitrox involves an understanding of partial pressures and oxygen limits, somewhat more advanced planning and preparation than air diving, and an acceptance of your added responsibility for safe diving. But the training to become a nitrox diver is far less than the initial training that prepared you to be a scuba diver. Once you are in the water, the rule of nitrox diving is the same as any other diving. Plan your dive, and dive your plan. You will meet a number of new or unfamiliar terms in this course. Some of them, such as partial pressure, you encountered in your first scuba course, but you may not have used or seen them since then. Important terms will be emphasized in bold type at least the first time they are used in this book, and defined in context when necessary. Enriched air nitrox, nitrox, oxygen-enriched air, and EANX are used interchangeably throughout this text. Where applicable, the X may be replaced by the oxygen percentage, as in EAN36. In your reading elsewhere, you will also see references to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Nitrox 1 and NOAA Nitrox 2. These terms refer to EAN32 and EAN36 respectively, and NOAA is currently working to change the terminology to NN32 and NN36. The amount of a component gas in a mixture may be expressed as a percentage or a fraction. A percentage compares the quantity of the component gas to a total of 100. A fraction compares it to 1. EAN36 can be said to be 36% oxygen and 64% nitrogen, or it can be said that the fraction of oxygen is 0.36, and that of nitrogen is 0.64. In formulas and calculations, the gas component is always expressed as a fraction. It is best not to use terminology in which the components are unspecified. Terms like 60-40 mix are ambiguous. This is particularly so because in some usages it is customary to state the oxygen first, and in others to state the inert gas first. If the meaning is not specified, either number could refer to the oxygen content, and getting it wrong could have disastrous results. Welcome to the world of nitrox diving. Like all NAUI diver courses, this course strives to achieve dive safety through education, NAUI's motto for almost half a century. Your NAUI EANX certification card will enable you to obtain enriched air gas fills at diver service providers around the world. This chapter covered what nitrox is, the history of nitrox, benefits of diving with enriched air nitrox, some common misconceptions about nitrox, and some points about terminology. Remember, NAUI endorsed nitrox diving in 1992, the first mainstream agency to do so. Used properly, EANX can increase diver safety and enjoyment. Now that you have been given an introduction to nitrox, you should be familiar with some basic concepts. You should be able to describe what nitrox is, list names for nitrox, state the early history of diving with gases other than air, state when NAUI sanctioned nitrox diving, and describe what nitrox is not.